Today's episode is brought to you by In My Bag Apparel and Customs. In My Bag is a brand that collaborates with talented artists from across the country to bring some unique and exclusive concepts to life at a reasonable price. For $15 off your first purchase, visit whatnot.com/invite/in_my_bag 2023. That's whatnot.com/invite/in_my_bag 2023 for $15 off your first purchase. And make sure to check them out on Instagram as well at in_my_bag 2023. Did you know the only letter to not appear in the periodic table is the letter J? Well, now you do. Let's get into it. All right. What's good, everybody? Welcome back to the Playbook Podcast. I'm Prescott Kelly. Today is Sunday, March 2nd. Glad to have you back with us. Lots to get into today. We've had some NFL moves, NBA talk a little bit later on, maybe if you guys are lucky. Welcome back, though. The Sixers want their money back on Joel Embiid. I don't really blame them. See, Deebo Samuel gets moved over to Washington, D.C. What does that mean for the trade market for Myles Garrett? The Giants they were trying for Matt Stafford, and they're looking at Aaron Rodgers now because, beggars can't be choosers, but apparently they should be. Travis Hunter, where should he go? How should he go? Number one overall. Let's go with that. And I was watching Family Guy the other day, and they had a police auction, and I don't know if those things are real life or not. Like, share, subscribe, smash the 5-star reviews. The audio podcast will be out later on. Wherever you get your podcast, you can see us there. But the first thing I want to get to is this kind of dropped a couple hours ago, I guess, is the rumors around the 76ers wanting to get money back or not have to pay Joel Embiid. And I get it. I'm somebody who, if you listen to all the reincarnations of this show, you know that I've been more pro player than I have been pro management. And that's no secret, right? It kind of makes me wonder. It's very bewildering to me when I see folks of the working class really cape up for owners and billionaires and defend them. And I'm all for capitalism. I'm all for you trying to get what you can get whenever you can get it, right? Like this isn't me trying to belittle, like trying to get your own money, right? But sometimes it doesn't come from your money. It comes from other money just kind of trickling down to you. But it is kind of weird to me how much the working class, for lack of a better term, defends the billionaires, whether it be through sports or politics, however you want to do this. It's an odd avenue for me to watch in real time through social media, and people defend them as opposed to defending their own. So for me, as somebody who is, I'm not going to be a billionaire ever. I'm probably not going to be a millionaire ever. I live comfortably. I'm good at what I do on my real job. I feel like I'm pretty good at what I do here. But I have always been pro labor as opposed to pro management. It doesn't mean that you have to be a malcontent. It doesn't mean that you have to be disrespectful to your superior. Again, don't want to use that word, but the people who are advising you and your managerial team, right? But the people who are just on the side of the billionaires all the time is wild to me. So I am largely pro player. So when the 76ers are in this space that they want to get, maybe not money back because they haven't paid Joel Embiid for his entire contract yet, they want to be able to get out from it with the whole medical retirement thing. So yes, I am pro player, but I am also not opposed to that dude doesn't show up for work, don't pay him. It's a delicate line though, right? Because we've seen, and I think Mario Escolar was the one who brought it up. He's like, hey, it should have been Ben Simmons and not Joel Embiid. That's a fair criticism and a fair point. Still got it back. John Wall is another guy who, due to injury, he made almost $200 million in a 4-year stretch and played half of one season. He played like 40 games out of a possible 330. That's wild to me. Now, there's again, we look at everything from everybody's perspective, right? We flip it on every coin. Is that if you're a player and you're that good and you think you're worth it, try me, right? Because that's you as the fans are just as much to blame as the actual owners themselves. Like if we actually put it in a vacuum of why would we pay these guys this much money? And the real thing is the fans are the ones who are saying we can't lose X player, right? We can't lose the John Walls. We can't lose, and I know this is going to sound really silly talking it out loud based on where we are as a society now and the way that we kind of look at sports. But in the moment, remember when John Wall was really, really good? We can't lose John Wall. So you're going to pay him the max because that's what you do with superstar players. You as fans say that, which means that obviously the owners have to listen to you. They don't have to, but they're going to because they don't want the backlash. And obviously they can just get another player. But we're looking at this from the John Walls, the Ben Simmons, now the Joel Embiids. It is, we can't pay you because you're not available. If the CBA is set up where they're guaranteed contracts, of course they're going to take advantage of it. And let's be serious for a moment. If they weren't that good, here's the thing. If they weren't that good, they would never get those max deals anyways, right? If it was just some dude that you couldn't give up on, and we as fans, we are terrible at this. You just can't give up on this guy. We can't give up on the quarterback. I always do this. I do this every time with quarterbacks who make the playoffs or make championship round games is we can't lose that starting quarterback. Yes, you can, but you don't think that you can. So what they're doing is placating to you, placating to their jobs, and placating to where they were drafted in relation to how good we think that they can be. So Joel Embiid is in this weird space, right? He is somebody that when he's available, he's MVP caliber dude. But he's also, and I've been saying this forever, man, he's 7 feet tall. He's talented. This is the thing, is that he's talented as all hell. But when you're built that way, you're not built to last. You're here for a good time, not a long time. But the NBA and these owners don't care about that. Could you imagine the pushback? That's the thing. Could you imagine the pushback if they didn't give Joel Embiid his contract when he got his extension, when they maxed him out? Philly would have been in an uproar. Not just because it's Philadelphia, because that's just how sports fans work. That is how all of this goes. It's cyclical. So, but also, them wanting their money back, I can understand because he missed basically 3 full years of his first year, or his first, contract year, his first contract eligibility. He was completely banged up. The last 3 years, mostly the same, but not entirely. But when you have Joel Embiid, it's somebody who, this dude's crazy talented, and when he's there, he's one of the dudes, right? And I will say this because Mario also said he was tired of the greatness fatigue when it came to Nikola Jokic, which I think is a very fair point because we do this a lot with quarterbacks, we do it with NBA players all the time, is we get greatness fatigue. And I think that Jokic is one of those guys where maybe we got that. And you could argue with the whole Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen MVP. You can make that argument because it's valid one way or the other. But Embiid, when he's there, and I have been kind of a prisoner of this, is that when he's available and when he's right, he's one of the most skilled players I've ever seen play basketball, especially at the big man position. Now, I'm not putting him in the greats of all time, the top 5 centers, anything like that. That is not what I do. It's not what I look at things. And it's really impossible to do that based on just the availability as well. I don't want to make this a sports talk debate, but it does really come down to, bro, you're not there. So when they're trying to recoup money from him or not having to pay him, it's a scenario where I haven't really seen a whole lot of precedents in the world of sports of trying to like not pay somebody because of injury history. Um, so for me personally, there's a part of me that really wants Joel Embiid to get all of his money. Because if the CBA is set up that way, if the union set up that way, he's not doing anything technically illegal. Again, the John Wall and the Ben Simmons things are, if it's here, it's here. Fix it. But then you're gonna have a labor strike, right? Because if you switch it too much, that's the problem. Is if you switch it too much, you could strike out for a very, very, very long time. Um, and nobody really wants it. I know that people are talking a lot, just a whole lot of about the NBA. But let's be serious. We can't not have professional basketball at all, regardless of what you think about how bad it is, or because it's of the '90s. Even in the '90s, we can miss that. That's a whole nother conversation for another day. But we need to get back into the players who need to play if they're available. But I also understand that Kawhi Leonard is another example of this, where he didn't trust his doctors in San Antonio, which is why I kind of understand why these players want to have things to themselves. Because Kawhi Leonard, we were all on Kawhi Leonard's back. We had him. We were in his corner in San Antonio, right? You don't trust your doctors, but they want to force you to play? Nah, sit out, dog. And then we get to see it over and because he won in Toronto, it built him even more equity. But now it's 5 years removed from that basically, and it's, well, when are you good? There's a skepticism of the fans. So like I understand why from every level, right? Joel Embiid is saying, I signed this contract. It's never been rescinded beforehand. Give me my money. And Philly's saying, if you can't play, we've paid you so much money. We want it back. And the players are kind of going through this whole thing as well. But again, before it's the next CBA, you've got to do something where either you cut paychecks in half if they miss games when they're healthy, but you never really know if they're healthy or not. Because if they play through injury, are you going to pay them more? Like it opens up this whole Pandora's box of, we're not going to pay you for certain games, but we will for others. We don't know if you're actually hurt or not, and your contract is null and void. The whole thing is it's. I understand why people get upset with the NBA because it has become such a player-driven league. But by the same token, they're not the only people who sign these things. But the billionaires do kind of have them by the balls and like, all right, well, what do you want to do? You want to get some more money this year or longevity or, free agent freedom? LaShawn Johnson saying the teams won't get the money back. So the thing for me is like, I saw this with the whole Joel Embiid thing, and I was just I was filibustering because I was getting ready to move on to this Deebo Samuel thing. And LaShawn, if you're free, I'll send you the invite. You can come chop it up for a bit. He said teams won't get the money back. I know they won't, but this is the reason why I brought this up with Joel Embiid is that I've never seen this ever pop up where a team is trying to recoup or not pay a player based on injury history. They're trying to make him medically retire, which there might be another example. I'm not sure if there is, but I've never seen one. And if there is, it certainly hasn't been to the degree of Joel Embiid, because if there was, I feel like I would have remembered that. But they're trying to not pay him if he can't medically play anymore, which again, I get it from their perspective, where we paid you a max deal. You're hardly ever available. But when you're available, you're good. And that's the enticing part, is that when you are a top 15, 20 player, especially, it's hard to not want to keep them, either from the fans' perspective or you as the organization. You're like, well, if we can't let them go, we got to build around them. But again, trust the return process is what I was saying as far as like the title episode is, trust the return process. Are you going to move off from him? Do you think you can get your money back? Do you think that you can just wipe his salary clean? Because I don't know if any of those things are even on the table. It has been rumored, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to happen. LaShawn says they're going to have to pay him, but it'll be an insurance claim for them to get money back. That's a good point. It's the Keith Van Horn rule. It has been around for 20 years. Oh, I forgot about Keith Van Horn. How about Keith Van Horn? Speaking about, horns and the Keith Vans. I decided to go on the next one. I think it's a really interesting top. I think it's an interesting talking point when it comes to uh, them wanting to get things back based on, because again, like they should be frustrated, but also you knew what he was. You knew what he was coming out of Kansas, and you signed him anyways based on his fragile history, and then gave him more money, and then knew that body was going to kind of break down. Anyway, I want to move on to Deebo Samuel because now Deebo Samuel is in the he's moved from San Francisco from the SF to the DC. And to me, this interestingly enough, I think this. So I talked about the Buffalo Bills signing Khalil Shakir last week, and I thought that it was one of those signings that very, very rarely does it make sense for both sides. This is a trade for me that makes sense for both sides. It's a little. I feel like San Francisco may have been able to get a little bit more for him. Maybe a player, maybe you go fourth rounder, and then one just like just a package player. It doesn't matter. But it feels weird that they're willing to go fifth rounder for Deebo in conference, which obviously it's not a huge deal because I don't think that the Commanders are real threats. I know a lot of Washington fans out there are probably gonna be pissed about this, but every single year we do this. I'm gonna look at it from just the conference standpoint, right? This year, the NFC Championship game was Eagles and Commanders, and we didn't have the Commanders even making the playoffs. And there they were at the conference championship. Well, they can only get better. Well, who was in the NFC Championship last year? It was the Lions. And the Lions didn't make it as far. Like, we do this every single year. The Bengals, when they went to the Super Bowl, well, they're going to win it next year. It's such a dumb way of doing things of, well, you only made it this far this year. That means you're going to get further next year. And I've made this argument for the last 5 years is why do we even do this then? If all you can do is stair step and get better, well then, I mean, shit, let's be serious. And it's going to be, who's going to be in the Super Bowl then? The Commanders and the Bills? Commanders, Ravens? Like, what are we doing here? Like, if we're just going to perpetually say you made it this far this year, you can only go further. No, other teams are going to get better. Other teams are going to have injuries. That's not how any of that works. So it's a good pickup for me on both sides because it sounds like Washington is picking up the money. If Washington, or I'm sorry, yeah, Washington is picking up the money. So they're going to take on, from what I understand, the entire salary of Deebo Samuel and then send a fifth round pick to San Francisco. So if this is all true, it puts San Francisco off the hook for 27 mil and gets a fifth round pick. Now you think that you get more for Deebo Samuel, but when Deebo was originally signed 4 years ago, I told you guys this was a bad signing from the get-go. Jimmy Garoppolo was your starting quarterback. Trey Lance was your backup. Then you had Trey Lance or Brock Purdy for the first. We're not going to revisit history completely. The whole thing just made no sense to me. So getting a fifth round draft pick, it seems like it's a little shy of what you should get in your return. But what has he been the last couple of years? Banged up, doesn't want to play running back. And I understand 100% why he doesn't want to because one, he's not. But that's what got you paid in the first place, was playing running back and playing wide receiver, and you weren't willing to do it. So now you're going to go to Washington, who has the cap space, and I understand, and that's why it's a good move for both squads. The Niners unload 27 million cap space. Washington has the money to go in and take it over, and you get a fifth round draft pick. But it seems like, based off what you guys have told me, Deebo's awesome, and the whole reason why the whole San Francisco machine works is because he's the cog that makes it work. Whoops. Now what are you going to do? Trent Williams is another year older. George Kittle is another year older. Brock Purdy is still Brock Purdy. Christian McCaffrey is still broken. That defense is obviously all these teams get older, but that's a broken team. Before this year started, I told y'all, if they don't win a championship this year, you just got to fire sale it. And it sounds like that's what they're going to do. There's been no rumors about McCaffrey yet, but there's been rumors around Brandon Ayuk potentially getting moved. I don't know if that happens, but all of these things are connected, right? Ayuk was good when Deebo was good, vice versa. It was the same thing with McCaffrey. When all the Avengers were together, you can make it work. When one of the pieces of the car is broken, the entire machine breaks down. Let me go back to the chat. He says they had no other choice. They're going to eat 31 million on a cap hit. I mean, I get it. The thing for me is I understand why they wanted to do it, because I honestly think that it was the right move. I really do. Moving Deebo is good for both. But I think that the biggest thing is this feels like an all-in move for Washington when, to me, they still aren't close. That felt like an overachieving year, because we get this, right? Like, you have overachieving years where, again, like at the very beginning of the season, we thought that Washington was going to be cheeks. That they had no chance of doing anything, and they end up in the NFC Championship game. Now, this is a very difficult song and dance that you have to go around with playing for the future and playing for now. Washington is going, we need to capitalize now. Man, you guys may not even make the playoffs next year. There's a good chance that you won't. Philly is still Philly. Okay, unless something catastrophic happens where basically the entire city of Philadelphia blows up, that's going to be your division winner, right? I think at the NFC North, you're going to have your 4 division winners and 3 wild cards. If Minnesota's as good as what you guys think they are, they should be back. So should Chicago. Not so should Chicago, but Chicago could get there. The NFC South is just the NFC South. Whoever wins that division is going to get in. But there's enough talent in other spots to be able to hijack one of your playoff spots if you don't win the division. And as long as Philly's still Philly, you're not going to. Washington needs defense. I 100% agree with that. If Philly gets Myles Garrett, shut it down. So I'm glad that LaShawn, I'm glad that you brought up Myles Garrett real quick, because I was thinking about this I was making lunch earlier. Me and Kiddo were hanging out, and I was thinking, man, this really does show you what the talent disparity is in the NFL. So you've got Deebo Samuel, who went for a 5th, who last time I was told, even 9 months ago, was the guy. Like, he's the wheel that makes everything go in San Francisco. You can't lose him. Goes for a 5th. And then you got Myles Garrett, who is rumored to go for 2 firsts. And that just shows you how much better Myles Garrett is at football than Deebo Samuel is. And before we get into, well, defensive ends matter more. Do they? Because all I ever hear about is all the wide receivers. You have to have a wide receiver. And they're all getting paid $30 million plus a year. Like, wide receivers now are a dime a dozen, bro. You can get a wide receiver anywhere. You can get 1,000-yard receiving wide receiver pretty much anywhere, especially if you feed them enough. But what we're talking about, Deebo Samuel, who was supposed to be the all-around football player, right? He's great at receiving. He's great in the backfield. He's great at blocking. He's great at run after catch. Got traded for a 5th-round pick. F-I-F-F. That's crazy to me, man. Y'all would tell me that he was immovable. Got moved. And Myles Garrett's about to go for 2 firsts, potentially. Nah, you can miss me with that. It says Philly will have to give up 3 ones minimum. Well, and I don't want to spend too much time spinning the wheels on the trade market, but it is interesting because, like, LaShawn, you and I have talked about this back and forth about where would you trade a certain player, right? You are very much, I know this for the audio audience later, this is going to be really bad, but we're here live. And I know that he doesn't want to trade anybody in division if at all possible. I come from the perspective of get the best deal. And with him being a Browns fan and Myles Garrett playing for the Browns, sometimes you would think that the return would be better in division. If the Browns were close to even winning the division, I would understand why you would be so apprehensive about wanting to have him not be dealt in division. I would get that. But if it nets me the best return, I'm taking it. It doesn't matter. And when he brings up that Philly needs to give up 3 first, I know that he's referring to we don't need to make them any better than they already are. Philly's D line is crazy. You don't need him. That's a luxury. But I also, coming from the Philly side, is you can never have too many DNs, bro. You can never have too many dominant pass rushers. And if I need to give up 3, I'm a weird dude when it comes to sports, right? I come at it from the because so many fans are like, we got to win right now to, well, let's go into rebuild mode. It's okay. I'm okay waiting for 15 years as long as we make the right moves. And you never make the right moves, right? You never make the right moves, right? You never get to the finish line of what you want as a fan. So it's always this back and forth. And I line somewhere in this middle, like the purgatory of sports takes of it's hard to do both. It's hard to win right now. It's hard to build for the future. And if Philly is so hell-bent on wanting to win back-to-backs because that's just what they want to do, on top of the fact, and the thing too is like their defense is young as hell. So this is the window. If you have to give up 3 and you're hell-bent on winning back-to-back, that's the way you do it. You go get Myles Garrett because you still have, 2 or 3 years left in that contract? You still have 2 or 3 years left before you got to re-sign with Dejean. You can let Josh Sweat go. Like that's the thing, right? You replace Josh Sweat and you still have Carter and Davis up front. If you're going to do it and go all in, this would be the time. And this is where the legacy stuff starts to matter, right? I personally don't care about legacies and everything like that, but I know these GMs and these teams, these players do, right? They do. They care about the legacy. I don't. I think it's a little overblown, especially from the fan perspective. We blow it out to be more of a thing because we want to be part of the talk more than the actual be a part of what's really going on, right? It's just easy for us to spit and say whatever we want to instead of going through the grime and the muck and the mud through all of it. But if Philly wants to do this, this is the time for them to do it. Cheap defense, great offensive players. You have the draft capital to be able, in theory, if you extend it throughout 25 and 26, go ahead and do it, man. But that is one of those moves that it's to me, because I feel like Philadelphia is already good enough. I wouldn't want to harbor the future later on because I know I'm going to have to pay these dudes. Even then, because we've drafted so well, why would I want to risk giving up draft capital for dudes that can replace me a linebacker or wide receiver or corner? You can still replace other dudes. So it's a fine balance, right? Like giving up 3 first to get Myles Garrett if you're Philly seems very aggressive. I understand if you want to do the whole back-to-back thing, but I could understand why you'd be a little bit hesitant, mostly because you've drafted so well. Maybe you're just thinking in the back of your mind, I don't need to do that. It's kind of what Kansas City's been doing with wide receivers for the longest time. Anyway, moving on. Man, the New York Giants are just going to continue New York Giant. It's so their entire basically since the Eli days, they've been a weird franchise, right? So they won 0 playoff games with Eli Manning besides the 2 Super Bowl runs. They benched him for Geno, then let Eli go back and start after one, right after the consecutive streak start. It's such a bananas organization. Then they trade away Odell Beckham, the whole for a hot dog and pretzels and all this other shit. Like the franchise is a complete catastrophe. But they went from wanting to have Matthew Stafford. Right. Well, we'll trade for him, which made no sense. We talked about this last week. It makes no sense for them to get Matthew Stafford. You're so far away. It's a complete disaster if you do that. And then Matt Stafford stays in LA. Great. Well, let's go ahead and go after Aaron Rodgers. Really? You want the dude who has gone back and forth and flippy floppy between Green Bay and New York and playing and retiring? Like, that's the guy that you want? It is very New York. I'll say this though, man. I don't know what they have in store. This is what I haven't heard this, but this just feels very New York-esque. Is, well, let's go and bring in Aaron Rodgers. Let's not trade the number 3 overall pick, because I believe, if I'm right, the Giants had number 3 pick. Well, let's go ahead and bring in Aaron Rodgers, keep the number 3 pick, draft a quarterback, and he'll learn from Aaron Rodgers. Why are we still having those conversations where we think that the older quarterback wants to mentor the younger guy? That seems like it's an antiquated way of looking at football and quarterbacking and everything else in between. Like, these guys don't want to give up their job. If they did, Aaron Rodgers would have been retired already. Right? Like, this doesn't seem like it's that difficult for me.